school, going places, taking ferry rides in the city.
It's okay, I know. We'll talk about it when we get home.
Running off to Belize.
What? You went where?
Ever since Carmen Cortez of Spy Kids confessed she often ran away to Belize, my ears perked up for any mention of the country in popular media. To see our country on the silver television screen provided some sense of validation, of being seen internationally as a country with its own identity, distinct enough from our neighbors in Central America and the Caribbean. Yet, what about Belizean identity do we get from these representations? And how do these notions of Belizean culture reinforce or reject stereotypes about Belizeans?
In this video, Andrea Habet and I, Gabrielle Hulse, will discuss Amazon Prime's Mad Dogs, CBS's Criminal Minds Beyond Borders, and TLC's 90 Day Fiancé, 3 U.S. productions made in the last decade that prominently feature Belize to make the case that in the foreign imagination, Belize functions as a malleable fantasy sufficiently unknown to distort its geographies and peoples into something often unrecognizable to Belizeans watching.
If he can live any way he wants to, why would he choose to live here?
Well, isn't this place supposed to be like party fucking central? Girls going wild and shit?
Doubt that. We're on the mosquito coast.
It's all about the taxes.
Was here for a tax break?
The rich retirees he sold the properties to moved here for the tax breaks, and now he's staying here for the tax breaks.
These representations often point to a construction of the country that fetishizes poverty, primitive masculinity, and indigeneity. Belize exists as a space where citizens of the U.S. empire can play out fantasies and heal traumas brought on by their participation in U.S. heterosexist society. Although idyllic in some ways, largely having to do with biodiversity and exotic locales, Belize's third world inefficiencies are used in these shows to advance plotlines, confirm stereotypes, and ultimately stroke the Western ego. Our lack of resources are deliberately mentioned, often for the sole purpose of giving an opportunity for our title characters, the foreigners, to exhibit some form of material superiority.
Since we don't have an embassy in San Pedro, we'll check in with the consulate and get clearance for all our weapons and vehicles.
Copy that.
In the case of Criminal Minds Beyond Borders, the entire premise of the show hinges on the absence of personnel and other resources by global majority countries.
Why is this tent in the middle of the beach? The guests are seeing this. It's causing concerns.
It's not our intention, but this is the scene of a crime.
And since San Pedro doesn't have a morgue, we're gonna have to do an on-site autopsy.
Did you say autopsy?
The show repeatedly insists that U.S. intervention is called for due to this lack of material resources, and the major obstacle to action being the lack of efficient bureaucracies supposedly found in the home places of the foreign characters.
Hey, she'll be okay. Street kids here, I don't know, they manage, you know?
Yeah. Just let him scavenge. Nothing we can do.
Are you saying that there's something I personally can do?
No, I'm saying the embassy. I mean, there's an American presence in this country. Yet the kids, everywhere we go, they're begging. Some of them probably being exploited.
Belize often serves the interests and desires of expats, investors, and tourists over Belizeans. Hotels, police forces, and local businesses regularly bend to the whims of visitors, whose presence implies the circulation of foreign capital, with Belizeans frequently positioned in relief to a U.S. abundance. The street kids mentioned at the beginning of the previous clip become fodder for moral discussions about charity, while the local police force are bumbling people ill-equipped to solve crimes without the more experienced FBI team.
We ran a preliminary investigation. We spoke to witnesses at Serrano's, followed the road that they drove on, but weren't able to find them or anything criminal in nature.
So your team has concluded there was no crime committed here?
Well, there's always a possibility of a crime having taken place. But with our small police force, limited resources, we have done everything we could within our capabilities.
Will you mind if we kick the tires on this?
Of course not. Just try not to scare away too many of the tourists.
Victims in the water.
We need to drag the bait ASAP.
I'm sorry, Jack. I don't have those kind of resources.
Oh, I do, actually. I have an old military buddy open a dive shop down here. I'll give him a call.
This superiority is a trait that the characters readily recognize. There is an understanding of the privilege to be an American, with a gratitude that comes from the context of being in Belize with the ability to access resources that prevent the worst-case scenarios, such as impoverishment and death.
What are they gonna do for us here, right now? Send the chopper?
I don't know, the FBI then.
This is not white man's America, Lex.
In Mad Dogs, the resolution to the US characters' conflict comes not from their own actions, but from the machinations of a powerful government able to act in a foreign territory like Belize without concern for local jurisdiction.
A long legacy of victors. American exceptionalism, don't forget that. Our ancestors harnessed the power of a fucking atom and used it to bring an empire to its knees. History is on your side. You're strong, you're dominant. I look at each one of you, and I see greatness.
What is also highlighted in these representations of U.S. abundance is how often it's leveraged to take advantage of Belizeans in financial precarity. While not explicitly sex workers, Angel from Mad Dogs and Ryan from 90 Day Fiancé are framed as people whose most readily available means of securing their well-being is to exchange sex for money with tourists like Kobe and Stephanie. In these instances, the Belizeans often bear the societal shame for their participation in these transactions, despite the mutual benefits to the foreigners soliciting sex work. Presumptions of criminality abound regarding these Belizeans. For instance, Stephanie professes concern regarding Ryan stealing her mother's engagement ring despite no indication that has had precedent in their relationship. In the case of Angel, her desire to receive compensation for the sex work she's already rendered is met with annoyance by Kobe, regardless of her efforts to directly communicate the terms of their engagement.
I skipped work today to do this.
Yeah, well, we're gonna have to reschedule.
Did I reschedule when you asked me to your bedroom to make dreams come true?
No, you didn't, and it was a wonderful evening.
You brag how you make all your millions, that you can help my family with their transfer of money.
I can, and I will. I just can't do it right now.
And please don't have taken my mother's ring. Oh, God, here it is. Here's my mother's ring. He didn't take that. I don't care if he stole anything else. I'm gonna go find myself a little cabana boy. I got tons of nice slides and slippers, and man, I got thousands of dollars of watches and tons of clothes.
Most notably in 90 Day Fiancé Stephanie, her relationship is rooted less in the individual and more in the exotified exploitation she derives pleasure from via the attention of Ryan and Harris, two men who've come to recognize her as a potential source of escape from their present socioeconomic circumstances. That's why the two Belizean men in her life are seemingly interchangeable, with little moments grief between relationships, as hinted by her Freudian slip in the next clip.
I will stick with you till you leave from here.
I appreciate you. I appreciate you, Harris. I appreciate you so much.
When not fulfilling a sex worker role, Black Belizean men are most often portrayed as stoic and ominous presences symbolic of potential dangers.
She advised, pull you down, man.
Hey, we don't have any money, so why don't you just leave?
Seriously, we don't have any cash.
There you go, a present from Belize.
Even though Black Belizean men are not the sources of the majority of the violence and aggression experienced by the central characters, the camera tends to linger on them in any scene in which they appear, as if the characters, and by extension, us as the audience, are expecting an outburst or unwelcome action of some kind in compliance with stereotypes of Black Caribbean men as either Mandingo-style lovers or threats to white Americans' well-being. Regardless of how little these individual encounters ultimately play out for the white Americans in terms of their safety or ability to progress in their goals, these productions repeatedly invite viewers to consider Belizean men as self-interested aggressors looking to prey on tourists.
Don't move!
You may want to thief me car.
Why don't you give the team my coordinates? I'm gonna need Clara for this. He's speaking Creole.
Linguistically, these shows facilitate further distancing of the Belizean characters from US viewers through a representation of Belizean Creole less interested in fidelity and more interested in exoticizing the locales and people the American characters interact with in order to compensate for otherwise formulaic narratives.
Even though Belize borders with Mexico, it has much more in common with the Caribbean.
That's why they all speak Creole.
Exactly. It's a pidgin language derived mainly from English, but includes Spanish and West African languages like Bantu and Akan.
And let me guess, you speak that too.
Akan.
You okay? I am sorry. Is everyone okay?
What were you doing?
My friend distracted me.
Well, how are you gonna fix this?
It's not that bad.
Is everyone okay?
Well, you were with them?
Yeah.
Then ask your friends how they're going to pay if it is.
Though understood as both a language derived from English as well as one with its own distinct morphology, the supposed Creole speakers in these shows often either speak a caricatured version or a form of English Creole more akin to those spoken in other English Caribbean territories.
He says somebody calls him just like the man who told him about the Jeep.
Do you know this man?
No, the man just go in the shop.
The man came into his shop, told him that he was on his way to go
Stop, he tell
fishing,
me he's EDG.
and saw a Jeep just off the road down in the ravine. What did he look like?
He wear some spectacles.
He wore sunglasses and a baseball hat, so he didn't get a great look at his face. And he was tan and spoke Creole, so he was definitely local. Now, that you remember Ape Funny?
I know a fish. Need me? No fish.
I asked him if there was anything else that he saw out of the ordinary, and he said that he knows fishing, and that man was no fisherman.
In the preceding clip, the Criminal Minds Beyond Borders linguist must translate the tow truck driver's Creole to make it comprehensible to the other American characters. To justify her translation work, the tow truck driver therefore delivers a form of Creole that is deliberately difficult to parse through, his final sentence tough for even Lila Vernon to understand. This underscores a fundamental issue of these portrayals. The Belizeans are not meant to be understood or really humanized beyond the needs of the plot. Nor is this more evident than in how Criminal Minds and Mad Dogs reduce indigenous people to a collection of harmful tropes and iconography.
Right, but he is not just cutting them off and out, he's actually eating them. It's an act of dominance. Eating the heart is an effort to absorb the victim's strength, while the hands and feet represent the most extreme ends of the body, thus encapsulating the whole being.
With the intention to ritualistically kill the husband.
Which is in step with the Mayan rules of engagement with other warriors.
His need to remove the hands and feet is all part of a premeditated delusion.
He's sadistic, fueled by fantasies.
And in modeling himself after a traditional Mayan warrior, the unsub is building confidence and adding credence to his fantasy.
The ease with which such stereotypical portrayals are done varies from the American men of Mad Dogs, adopting a pastiche of indigenous aesthetics when attacking a potential threat, to the Criminal Minds team characterizing pre-modern Maya as savage warriors.
The unsub is killing and consuming part of the males, but keeping the females alive, thus absorbing their strength and their property, which was a common warrior practice.
Property?
Historically, women were considered legal possessions that men could leverage for a variety of reasons.
The interchangeability is highlighted by the quickness with which one indigenous group, the Maya, is swapped out for another, Aztec, simply based on Eurocentric histories of indigenous Americans.
So what if he's taking the dead men's women as his wives?
So our unsub is not only a cannibal, but also a polygamist?
Mayans were monogamous. The only practicing polygamists in the area were Aztecs.
So his ritual is Aztec, not Mayan.
But Aztecs were Mexican.
Right. So we're looking for a mestizo who's good with a blade and had access to all of our victims.
Popular American media has had its role in creating images of life abroad for Belizeans, but gradually has also reflected a distorted sense of life at home. These types of shows serve as a modern digital form of imperialism, with its viewership involuntarily absorbing American ideology. As we can see from these Americentric depictions of Belizean reality, it's imperative that Belizeans do not tie our national identity to any accessory of colonialism, including the media we consume. This should also serve as a reminder of why it is important for Belizeans to create and circulate our own understandings of our culture through varied forms of media and art.
What? You know what? This is over!